The first rule was written in black marker on the security office wall. Do not go to the third floor after midnight. The second rule was taped beneath it. If you hear footsteps above you, do not look at the ceiling. I thought the rules were some kind of joke. That was before I spent my first night inside St. Agnes Medical Center. The hospital had been abandoned for almost 11 years. No electricity, no patients, no staff. At least, that's what the company told me. But at 3:17 in the morning, the elevator began moving. And according to the control panel, it was coming down from the third floor. I had been unemployed for almost 2 months when I found the job posting. The position was listed as overnight security for an abandoned medical facility outside a small town in western Pennsylvania. The company was called Northvale Property Protection. The advertisement didn't say much. It mentioned 12-hour shifts, no public access, basic patrol duties, and a higher-than-average hourly rate. I should have questioned that last part. Instead, I applied the same night. 2 days later, I received a phone call from a man named Dennis. He told me the hospital was scheduled for demolition, but the project had been delayed because of legal issues involving the property. Until the demolition date was finalized, the insurance company required someone to monitor the building. Dennis made the job sound simple. Walk the first and second floors every 2 hours, check the doors, monitor the security cameras, call the police if anyone broke in. That was it. When I asked why the pay was so high, he said the location was remote and most guards quit after seeing the building. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He didn't laugh with me. St. Agnes Medical Center sat behind a chain-link fence at the end of a cracked service road. The building was 6 stories tall, but only 3 floors were visible above ground. The rest of the hospital extended underground. The main entrance had been boarded up. Several windows were broken, and ivy covered most of the brick walls. Above the entrance, the old hospital sign was still hanging. Only 3 letters remained visible: S-A-G. The sign flickered in the rain. Dennis met me outside the security gate. He was in his late 50s and wore a gray company jacket with no logo. He handed me a ring of keys, a flashlight, and a small 2-way radio. Then he gave me a clipboard. At the top of the page was a list of rules. I remember counting 8. Dennis watched me read them. Most of these are common sense, he said. The first rule said, keep the main entrance locked at all times. The second said, do not use the elevators. The third said, do not enter the surgical wing. The fourth said, ignore all intercom announcements. The fifth said, do not respond to voices coming from empty rooms. The sixth said, if a door is open during your patrol, close it without entering. The seventh said, do not go to the third floor after midnight. And the eighth said, if the security radio turns on by itself, leave the building immediately. I looked at Dennis. Is this a real policy? He took the clipboard back from me. Just follow it. Then he unlocked the gate and drove away. I watched his taillights disappear through the rain. That was when I realized there was no one else scheduled to work with me. The first 2 hours were uneventful. The ground floor contained the lobby, administrative offices, a cafeteria, and the old emergency department. Everything smelled like dust, mold, and something metallic. The hospital had been stripped of most of its equipment, but not everything had been removed. There were still wheelchairs in the hallways. Old patient charts lay scattered across the floor. Several examination rooms had curtains hanging from their ceiling tracks. The curtains moved whenever the air conditioning system turned on, but the air conditioning system had been disconnected years earlier. At 11:40, I reached the end of the emergency department. The hallway ahead was dark. I shined my flashlight toward a set of double doors. One of them was open. That bothered me because I had checked the same doors earlier. They had been locked. I remembered Rule 6. If a door is open during your patrol, close it without entering. So I walked over and pulled the door shut. As soon as it clicked into place, I heard a sound from behind it. A soft, rhythmic tapping. 3 taps. Then silence. I stood there for a few seconds. Then 3 more taps. I told myself it was a pipe. I returned to the security office and wrote it down as a maintenance issue. At least, I tried to. When I looked at the clipboard, the ink on the page had already faded. The security office was located near the main entrance. There were 6 old monitors on the desk. Only 4 cameras still worked. Camera 1 showed the lobby. Camera 2 showed the emergency department hallway. Camera 3 showed the stairwell. Camera 4 showed the second-floor corridor. The other 2 screens displayed gray static. On the wall beside the monitors was a floor plan. The hospital had 3 above-ground floors, but the security map only showed the first 2. The entire 3rd floor had been marked with a thick red line. No rooms were labeled. No stairwell was shown. No elevator access was listed. Just a blank section of the building. At midnight, the fluorescent lights flickered. The radio on the desk made a sharp popping sound. I turned toward it. The screen was off. Then the radio turned on by itself. I remembered Rule 8. If the security radio turned on by itself, leave the building immediately. I reached for it. Before I could touch the radio, a voice came through the static. It was weak and distant, but I understood the words. Security to the 3rd floor. I froze. The voice repeated itself. Security to the 3rd floor. I grabbed my jacket and keys. I was ready to leave. Then the voice said my name. Not my first name, my full name. The radio went silent. I stared at it for almost a minute. Then I heard the elevator bell. Read only the following script. Do not add, remove, summarize, or paraphrase any words. Use a calm, serious, American male horror narrator delivery with natural pacing and restrained emotion. Do not speak this instruction aloud. There was an elevator across from the security office. Dennis had specifically told me not to use it. I stepped into the lobby. The elevator doors were closed. The indicator above them showed the number 3. The number began to change. 3, 2, 1. Then the display went dark. A second later, the elevator arrived. The doors opened. Inside was a woman. She was standing with her back to me. She wore a pale hospital gown. Her hair was wet and hung down to her shoulders. I couldn't see her face. For a moment, I thought she was a mannequin. Then she raised one hand and pressed the button for the 1st floor. I couldn't move. The elevator doors remained open. The woman slowly turned her head toward me. Not her body, only her head. Her neck twisted farther than it should have. I saw one eye looking at me through her wet hair. Then the lights in the lobby went out. When they came back on, the elevator was empty. The doors were still open. The display above them showed the number 3. I didn't go near it. I ran back into the security office and locked the door. For the next 20 minutes, I watched the elevator camera. Nothing moved. Then, at 12:26, the elevator doors opened again. This time, something stepped out. It looked like a man in a hospital uniform. He stood beneath the camera. His face was pointed directly toward the lens, but the image was too distorted to see his features. He remained there for almost 30 seconds. Then he walked toward the emergency department. The camera lost him when he turned the corner. I know I should have left, but fear does strange things to people. Instead of leaving, I convinced myself that someone had broken into the building. Maybe the woman in the elevator was an intruder. Maybe the man on camera was another trespasser. I took the flashlight and radio. Then I went upstairs. The second floor was darker than the first. Most of the ceiling lights were missing, and the hallway was filled with old hospital beds covered in plastic. Camera 4 showed the corridor from the opposite direction. I kept looking at the monitor on my phone through the camera system. That was when I noticed something strange. The camera feed showed me standing in the hallway. But on the screen, I was about 20 feet ahead of where I actually was. I stopped walking. The image of me on the monitor stopped too. Then the image turned around. I didn't. The figure on the screen was facing the camera, facing me. It lifted one hand and pointed toward the end of the hallway. I looked ahead. There was an old stairwell door. It was marked, "Authorized personnel only." I walked toward it slowly. From the other side of the door, I heard a child humming. It was a simple melody. 3 notes repeated over and over. I placed my hand on the doorknob. Then I remembered Rule 5. Do not respond to voices coming from empty rooms. The humming stopped. A child's voice whispered through the door. "Are you the new guard?" I let go of the doorknob. The voice spoke again. "He went upstairs." I asked, "Who?" The moment I said the word, the radio in my hand turned on. The same voice came through the radio. "He went upstairs." Then the stairwell door began to open. I ran. I reached the security office and slammed the door behind me. I locked it. Then I pushed a filing cabinet against the handle. For several minutes, nothing happened. No footsteps, no radio, no voices. Only the sound of my own breathing. I looked at the camera monitors. The elevator camera showed the lobby. The stairwell camera showed the second floor. The corridor camera showed an empty hallway. Then the elevator indicator changed. 3. The elevator bell rang. I watched the doors open. No one stepped out, but the camera image began to shake. White lines moved across the screen. Then the hallway lights on the camera feed came on one by one. The first light, the second, the third, all the way down the corridor. Something was walking toward the camera. It was too tall to be a person. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. It stopped in front of the elevator. Then it looked directly at the camera. The monitor went black. A sound came from above me. 3 slow footsteps, directly over the security office. I looked at the ceiling. I shouldn't have. There were dark stains spreading across the white ceiling tiles. One of the tiles sagged downward. Then a drop of water fell onto the desk. It was cold, and it smelled like disinfectant. Another drop landed on the radio. The radio turned on. This time, The voice was clear. "Security to the third floor." I didn't answer. "Security to the third floor." I covered my ears. Then the voice changed. It sounded exactly like mine. "Please open the door." I backed away from the entrance. The voice continued. "I'm trapped up here." I looked at the camera monitor. On the black screen, an image slowly appeared. It showed the third floor. There was a long hallway lined with hospital rooms. At the very end stood a security guard. He was wearing my jacket. He was holding my flashlight. And he was looking directly at the camera. Then he raised his hand and waved. The pounding began at 3:17. One hit every few seconds. The door shook in its frame. I grabbed the keys and ran toward the rear exit. The security office had a second door that led into the loading area. I unlocked it and sprinted through the dark hallway. The emergency lights came on as I passed. Every light behind me turned off, one by one. The pounding followed me. Not from the security office anymore. From the walls. From the ceiling. From behind the doors. Read only the following script. Do not add, remove, summarize, or paraphrase any words. Use a calm, serious, American male horror narrator delivery with natural pacing and restrained emotion. Do not speak this instruction aloud. I reached the loading dock and pulled the emergency exit bar. The door opened. Cold rain hit my face. I ran across the parking lot toward the fence. Behind me, the hospital lights came on. Every window on the first, second, and third floors glowed white. Then I heard the intercom. It was loud enough to hear outside. "Code Blue, third floor," the announcement repeated. "Code Blue, third floor." I climbed the fence and landed hard on the other side. A few seconds later, I heard a car approaching. It was Dennis. He stopped beside me and lowered the passenger window. He didn't ask what happened. He only looked at the hospital. Then he said, "You looked at the third floor." I told him I had never gone up there. He shook his head. "You saw it." I asked him what it was. He stared at the building. Then he said, "That's why they pay extra." Dennis drove me to a gas station several miles away. He gave me a bottle of water and told me to sit in the passenger seat. Then he finally explained. St. Agnes had closed after a fire in the surgical wing. The official report said 9 people died. But according to Dennis, the hospital had been empty for months before the fire. The third floor had been sealed years earlier after several patients and staff members began reporting the same thing. A hospital corridor that didn't appear on any blueprint. An elevator that stopped on a non-existent floor. A voice on the intercom calling employees by name. The hospital administration blamed stress and sleep deprivation. Then, a night nurse disappeared. Her body was never found. After that, the third floor was permanently closed. A year later, the hospital shut down completely. "Why keep hiring guards?" I asked. Dennis looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Because the insurance company needs someone to confirm no one is inside." "That doesn't make sense." "No," he said. "It doesn't." I asked him about the first rule. He said it was added after the doors at the emergency department started opening by themselves. I asked about the elevator. He said it had been disconnected. I asked him about the voice using my name. Dennis didn't answer. Instead, he asked me how long I had been inside the security office after the radio spoke. I told him maybe 40 minutes. He looked at the clock. It was 4:02 in the morning. Then he said, You were gone for 6 hours.
I didn't believe him until he showed me the security footage.
The footage began at midnight. It showed me walking into the security office. Then, at 12:26, I left. I walked toward the elevator. The doors opened. I stepped inside. The elevator rose to the 3rd floor. The footage showed the display change from 2 to 3. Then the camera cut to static. The next clear image was from 3:17 in the morning. I was standing in the lobby, alone. The elevator doors were open behind me. My face was turned toward the camera, but my eyes were closed. I stood there for almost an hour. At 4:01, I suddenly opened my eyes and ran toward the rear exit. That was when Dennis arrived. I asked him what happened during the missing time. He said the footage from the 3rd floor was never available. There was only one recording from that floor. It had been captured 3 years earlier. A security guard standing in the exact same hallway, wearing the exact same jacket, holding the exact same flashlight. The guard looked at the camera and said, "Please don't send anyone else up here." Then he turned around and walked into the dark. I never went back to St. Agnes. Northvale Property Protection stopped calling me. A week later, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was my old security clipboard. The page with the 8 rules was still there, but someone had added a 9th rule at the bottom. The handwriting looked like mine. It said, "If you leave the building, do not look back at the 3rd floor windows." I had never seen that rule before. But there was something else. A small black mark appeared beside Rule 7, the rule about not going to the 3rd floor after midnight. It looked like someone had checked the box. I kept the clipboard in a drawer for several months. Then, one night, at exactly 3:17 in the morning, my apartment intercom buzzed. I live on the 3rd floor. There is no elevator in my building. I picked up the receiver. For several seconds, all I heard was static. Then a voice whispered, "Security to the 3rd floor." It sounded like me. And before the line went dead, it added, "You forgot to lock the door." I stood in the hallway, staring at my apartment door. I was certain I had locked it before going to bed, but the handle was slowly turning. Not from the outside, from inside my apartment. I backed away without making a sound. The door opened 3 inches. Darkness filled the gap. Then my flashlight rolled across the floor and stopped at my feet. It was the same flashlight Dennis had given me at St. Agnes. I had thrown it into a river the morning after I left the hospital. The light came on by itself. Its beam pointed down the hallway. At the far end stood a figure wearing my old security jacket. The figure was too tall. Its head almost touched the ceiling. It raised one hand and pointed behind me. I turned just enough to see the elevator doors at the end of the hall. My apartment building had never had an elevator, but the doors were there now. The display above them showed the number 3. The bell rang. The doors opened. Inside stood the woman from St. Agnes. Her wet hair covered her face. Behind her, the elevator was filled with hospital beds. Every bed was occupied. Every person beneath the sheets was sitting upright. The woman lifted one finger to her lips. Then, the radio on my kitchen table clicked on. My own voice came through the static. "Please don't send anyone else up here." The figure at the end of the hallway took one step toward me. I ran down the stairs. I didn't stop until I reached the street. When I looked back, every window on the third floor was lit. Someone was standing behind each one. They were all wearing security uniforms. They were all looking down at me. And in the center window stood Dennis. He was holding the clipboard. Even from the street, I could see that he had added another rule. The 10th rule. It said, "If the new guard escapes, hire him again." The next morning, Northvale Property Protection called me. The voice on the phone was calm. It sounded like Dennis. "Your next shift begins tonight," he said. I told him I had quit. There was a long pause. Then he said, "You can quit the job. You can't quit the floor." The line went dead. At 3:17 that afternoon, I received one final message. It contained a photograph. The photograph showed the security office at St. Agnes Medical Center. The old monitors were glowing. The clipboard was on the desk. And beside it was a fresh employee badge. My name was printed on it. Beneath my name was a job title I had never seen before. Third Floor Security. I deleted the photograph. It appeared again. I blocked the number. The phone rang from my own number. I never answered. But the voicemail arrived anyway. It was 3 seconds long. First, there was the sound of an elevator moving upward. Then came 3 slow footsteps. Finally, a voice whispered, "Security to the 3rd floor." It sounded like me. It sounded like Dennis. And it sounded like every guard who had gone upstairs before me. I still have the clipboard. I keep it locked inside a metal box. I never open it after midnight. But sometimes, when the apartment is quiet, I hear pages turning inside. One page at a time. Slowly, patiently, as if someone is reading the rules and waiting to see which one I break next. And every morning, the list is a little longer. The last time I checked, there were 11 rules. The final one was written in my handwriting. If you hear your own voice calling from the 3rd floor, answer. I don't know what happens if I do. I don't want to find out. But last night, at exactly 3:17 in the morning, someone knocked on my bedroom door. 3 times. Then silence. 3 more times. And from the hallway, my own voice whispered, "Are you the new guard?" This is an original